Welcome, everybody, to the Dr. Leadership Lounge, where we have conversations with business leaders from all walks of life about how and why they are successful. Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Leadership Lounge. This is Dr. Leadership speaking today, and today I'm very, very blessed to have Ryan Farris join the show. Ryan is a seasoned executive, renowned for his exceptional leadership across a spectrum of industries. His career's been spanning over 2 decades, and he's consistently demonstrated his dedication to innovation, entrepreneurship, and driving success. Currently, he holds multiple prominent roles. Ryan is the president and chief operating officer for Alphagraphics, Postnet, and USBH, 3 very prominent entities in the print and communication sector, the life I live in, of course. And Ryan also serves as CEO at PrintSpeak, an Australian-based print and sales CRM company. Furthermore, his influence extends to other brands, where he actively participates on various boards, including the esteemed Threshold brands. Ryan's influence resonates across international boundaries through his affiliation with MBE Worldwide. Many of you know it as Mailboxes, etc. As part of this global organization, he lends his expertise to support Multicopy in the Netherlands and spearheads the print business for Mailboxes, etc. across Italy, Spain, and Germany. Throughout this illustrious career, Ryan has held a range of pivotal roles in both public and private spheres. His journey has encompassed serving as the CEO of Wed Inc., acting as the CTO for Alphagraphics, and assuming the mantle of EVP of Sales and Marketing at PageFlex. Notably, he founded and led Earth Integrate, leaving an indelible mark on the landscape of technology and entrepreneurship. His influence also left a great mark at Consolidated Graphics. Now a lot of people know that as R.R. Donnelley, where he held strategic executive positions within their sales and technology divisions. His passion for innovation and commitment to entrepreneurship have led him to establish and manage numerous ventures. Startups include World Web Creations, Rent Locators, UR Talker, and Nolan Technology. The latter 2 focused on developing enabling technology for nonverbal and special needs children, showcasing Ryan's empathetic side of his commitment to making a meaningful impact. We're going to talk a lot more about that. And though born and raised in the heart of Texas and full of Texas pride, Ryan Farris's journey led him to his favorite state, Colorado, where he shares his life with his devoted wife of 23 years and their 3 cherished children. Ryan's story is one of perseverance, leadership, and a genuine desire to make a world a better place through innovation and compassionate leadership. And with all of that, I welcome Ryan Farris to the show. Ryan, how are you today?
I'm great, Brent. It's a great pleasure to be on the show. I must admit I'm pretty humbled. You've had some great guests, and it's quite an esteemed pleasure to be able to join and talk a little bit about my background and share a little bit of back and forth with you.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, too, and I have been very fortunate. And you know what? The next person that joins the show will think exactly the same of you. Go, man, how am I going to stand up to Ryan Farris? After, reading your intro here as we were kind of putting all that thing together, what did you do in the afternoon? I mean, my goodness gracious, that is a list of accomplishments for sure. And, a Texan, I have a sister in Texas and spent some time down there, a number of friends down in Texas, but that Texas should be proud of all you've accomplished. How did your life kind of begin in Texas? Tell us about the younger years here for a minute, because people always like to know, what was the upbringing like? What was the family life like? How did you get? I mean, let's face it, you got a lot of spring in your step to just be able to say what you've done. How did that come about?
That's a great question. Yes, born and raised in Texas, several generations. Actually, West Texas, nothing too glamorous out there, but some tumbleweed, some high wind, and some good heat. But that was where I started, and 2 great parents that had a lot of structure and discipline. My dad initially was a teacher, so actually an elementary teacher.
That's
before
awesome.
Becoming a fantastic sales professional. My mother was actually a buyer for clothing stores, so a great taste, impeccable taste for style and fashion, and it was great. In fact, my earliest notable memory that shaped, a good piece of my life was when I was 5 years old, living in Lubbock, Texas. No fear, right? Learning to ride a bike and getting out there like I think most kids did back in that day. But I had the additional foolishness to believe I could jump really high off of a homemade ramp. and managed to break my jaw in 3 places in that
no.
endeavor. And so my first, early years in school, public school, I literally had my mouth wired shut. So my jaw, in order to let it heal, they had to wire my mouth shut. So that was my first experience of learning not to talk, if you will, in school, and obviously scaring the heck out of my teachers, wearing a pair of scissors around my neck in case they needed to cut my mouth open.
In an emergency.
So my dad tells a very humorous story about the fear in my teacher's face when they learned that if I'm choking by any means, they have to use the scissors to cut my mouth open. So that was my early beginnings in Texas, and hard to believe, but you learn a lot when you wear not just braces of that magnitude, but literally headgear and other other things for the next 10 years in your life.
Getting it all straightened out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're lucky. I'll tell you a funny story. I was in high school, and just talking about breaking jaws, so it wasn't me, but I was a part of it. There were several of us that were out playing the proverbial hooky from the class right after lunch, playing Frisbee outside. Back, you and I are I think we're the same age, actually. And life was just a little tougher back then, but we were playing Frisbee, and a Frisbee was in between two guys, and they both went running and dove to catch it. And one guy's shoulder met other guy's jaw and shattered his jaw in several places. And he was wired shut the rest of the rest of his high school year too. And my teachers would have been happy if it would have been me, because I've always been kind of a talker. Troy, I'll just say Troy V, his last name started with a V, was not a talkative kid to begin with, so nobody really recognized what was impacting his life. But he too had the wire snips on him at all times in case there was an emergency. So that's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's a crazy story, and it's funny because we'll go out to eat dinner, whatever, and people ask, what do you eat, what do you not eat, and I have no aversion to any food on the planet. I can pretty much tolerate anything, enjoy it, consume it. And I hearken it back to those days when my jaw was wired shut. I had to eat through a straw for everything.
Yeah.
Eat through a straw. And my parents, in their cavalier way, just told the daycare that watched me after school, just make sure his food is blended. Well, they blended it all together. all
God.
Wound up in the blender. And you can only imagine there's nothing worse than a let's say a shake that has your milk, your veggies, and your protein all mixed together. So yeah, nothing phases me now. So when other people are cringing at the green drink, I'm like, that's nothing. That's
you haven't seen anything. That's right. I bet that was some interesting taste that you were experiencing. And how old were you?
I was 5. I was 5 years old. And the funny thing is, you kind of think, the memory won't last, but because of having to wear headgear, and I don't even like to call it like medieval type of dentistry back then, but it somewhat was compared to what they do now.
Today, right?
I'm out there playing basketball even by 4th and 5th grade, right? By my 10, 11-year-old age, I still have to have this headgear thing on that's getting knocked off, repaired every week. And so it was something that stuck with me. I didn't get my final braces off until close to my senior year of high school. So it was an interesting accident.
Had a lot of collateral impacts, but I bet that taught a lot of resiliency. It
really did. I think, 2 key aspects, learning to listen a lot because you're forced to, and the value of it, and how to communicate with minimal words, which I think people can still say I do, whether it's good or bad, I don't know. But, also the whole concept of, that your appearance is only one component of, how you can perform or how people perceive you. And, whether it was the headgear, the braces, or all the other things that come with it, it doesn't need to prevent me from doing anything, whether it was that basketball sport that was, occasionally super painful, or squeezing into a football helmet, or whatever that was. It's just another part of life. And I think, that overcoming challenges, fits really well into that. And I certainly still remember and reflect on those moments.
And that's, you hit a bunch of chords there. Now, your mom being inside of the fashion industry, they probably shined you up real good with your clothes to distract everybody from the headgear. You had the yin to your yang, and people have always said I have a voice for radio, and I say and a face for one too. So I understand working with limitations, let's say, in our
Yeah,
lives.
actually, an even funnier story. Not to keep talking about this one
No,
incident,
it's
but
okay.
my mom was. You're more on than you realize. My mom was so focused on making sure I looked as good as possible coming out of this.
Right.
They found a plastic surgeon out of New York to come in and repair my face because I'd kind of ripped off my bottom lip,
Oh
and
my goodness.
so they literally had a plastic surgeon take a little of my rear, if you will, and fill it into my lip. And so the running joke is you're literally kissing my ass.
I was going to say you're talking out of your ass.
Exactly.
Is the other one that came to mind.
So my wife really likes that one.
Oh, I bet she does. Man, resiliency. And, I did a whole podcast on self-deprecating humor, on how it's important in a leadership role to be able to make fun of yourself too, right? You drop barriers and you get better collaboration when people see you as a real individual. And now I see you completely differently. So next time I'm in Denver and we're doing lunch or something, I'll be sure to bring that up. Careful, chew your food, or I'll blend it. I'll be sure to bring it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, parents are very impactful, it sounds like. Was there anybody else that was, before we kind of go into your career, because there's a lot to cover here, was there anybody else that was real impactful on your life, your young life like that, from a role model?
I mean, you fast forwarded to another kind of milestone for me in 1985. I moved from Lubbock to Arlington, Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth.
Yep,
Metro.
I have a niece that lives in Arlington, by the stadium.
Yeah, so for me, it's fifth grade. I'm about 10, 11 years old. It's 1985, and the Top Gun movie is airing.
Oh, yeah.
And, okay. And so now I've got that same hairstyle, everything. So I'm identifying a lot with the Tom Cruise, and we got fast cars, and we got jets. And in particular, okay, there was two Porsches in that movie, and some people only remember the one when she pulls up to the house to see Tom. But there was another one on the tarmac. So there was a 1958 Speedster convertible, which is still one of the most beautiful vehicles to me on the planet.
Yep.
And then the second one was the 911, right, the convertible.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this now becomes, right, the dream car, right? I really want this car. And so, the next really, and I mean super kind of impactful person that, maybe now knows it today after some of these interviews, but didn't know it at the time, was my next door neighbor. In his driveway was a 1986 red convertible 911.
Wow.
And I immediately, turned to my dad. We just moved into this house. This is my next door neighbor, and beautiful red Porsche that I envy already.
Yep.
And I turned to him and I said, "Hey, what does he do, and how did he get that car?" In classic, father-son relationship, he says, "The only way you're going to find out is if you go ask him." so he doesn't give me the answer. He doesn't tell me, right? He makes me go seek the information. And so I go meet this man, and I still talk to him to this day, Mike Yaw. And he actually turns around to me and says, "I'm an entrepreneur." And I'm, mind you, I'm in fifth grade here. This is, 10, 11 years old. I have no idea what the word entrepreneur means.
Wouldn't even know how to look it up to spell it to look it up, right?
And unfortunately, dating myself, this is the Encyclopedia Britannica days, right? So
there was no Google.
So I do that. I go back and I figure out, okay, he's his own self-made, businessman, or he owns and operates his own business. I later learned that it's a, Domino's franchise, that he actually owns most of them throughout the entire Dallas-Fort Worth metro.
Wow, doing okay.
And and it sets immediately in my mind, that's what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to be my own boss. I'm going to, do the things that get me to that status. And obviously at that young age, it's the possessions and power attributes, right? I want to be famous, or I want the car, or whatever.
Yep.
But it definitely stuck, and it never wavered. It's a fascinating aspect. It was really a kind of a pivotal point for me that put me on several paths, if you will, to how to become that person, right? How to become an entrepreneur. So pretty interesting.
That's awesome. Cars have always been big thing. So my next guest coming on actually is an F-15 Eagle fighter pilot that has 650 hours of combat experience from Desert Storm through Iraq and Afghanistan. And his name is Russell Brown. I'm actually meeting with him a little bit later this weekend, just doing the preemptive call like we did. And so planes for sure. and then a quick Porsche story, and then we're going to jump into your story. So talking about cars, it was 1989. My cousin, who my dad and his dad were identical twins, and I had an IROC Z28, 1985 IROC Z28, and he was always mad that he didn't have a car that could run with it. And he went out and he got it was a used 80, so this is an 89. I remember the summer of 89. It was like the most impactful summer. All the great concerts went to. I was out of, I was in college, so some spending money, and you were able to go do things and get into, bars and all the different stuff. Well, we're out on this 2-lane road outside of Des Moines, and we're coming back, and it's just a long straightaway. And up behind us comes the most beautiful car I'd ever seen in my life, and it was a 959 Porsche, a brand new 89.
Oh, yeah.
And didn't know what it was from looking at it, because that was a whole new body style that year. And my cousin downshifts and hits it and goes off, and he goes, "What's he think of that?" And I said, "I don't know. You can ask him as he's going by." And this thing went by us like we were sitting still, and his was a convertible.
Man.
We had the top down. I'm going, "You better have a lot more, better have a lot." And we're just hauling. This guy just gives a little toot and goes, well, come to find out, we follow this guy, and he waves us over, and we stop at a bar and have beers with this guy and he was an entrepreneur, a private business owner that had this brand new 959. So your story resonates very strongly with me, and my cousin Todd listens to the show every once in a while. Todd, I know you still remember that day because your tail was between your legs, because it was Germany won, USA nothing that day between the cars, and just a funny story. But
fantastic.
Well, so entrepreneurship.
Two very memorable cars, by the way. Those are. I still remember those as well. So that's amazing.
Beautiful car. I can remember he pulled in and parked, and the back wing sunk into the car, and I went, "You got to be kidding me." It was just such an impactful day, still to this day. Well, entrepreneurship definitely stuck with you because you call yourself a solopreneur. Leadership and not management is something that you pride yourself on. And, you've had a number of entrepreneurial developments in your life. But tell me a little bit, and the listeners a little bit about, you have 3 key dimensions that you talked about with me, is where I'm going with this. And they've made you into the leader you are today. And there's some progressions through your career and life. And the first one you bring up is leadership, not management. Let's talk about that for a minute. Just kind of take me down the road of what you mean by that.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question, and there's a lot of components that go into it. But looking backwards, there are certain gating moments in my life that really moved me and progressed me much faster, right? And I'm really grateful for some of those forced on me, and some of those I sought out. But
right,
as you reflected earlier, I had this ambition and desire, right, to become an entrepreneur, and part of that was slightly misguided in a way. In my early career, 18, 19. My mission was all about me, right? I'm going to get the financial education. I'm going to get what I need to be successful for myself. I started a couple business that I largely just did solo, right? It was more of, I'm going to learn how to, build and sell websites. And this was in the 90s when there is no tools to do these things.
Yeah, you were leading edge there for sure.
Yeah, you literally had to have your own T1 line that you resold out to your customers as part of the package. I was competing with the Yellow Pages, if that gives you any idea what was going on back then. So
I remember.
I still think back to having a conversation with a country club manager as to why he should put money into a website instead of the Yellow Pages.
That's
and
right.
I'm like, I can't believe
we're talking about this. Yeah.
And listen, I think it was a fantastic, period of my career where I did learn about business. I did, begin to check that box of being an entrepreneur, which really we think back to those now as solopreneurs. And it was great. I certainly, progressed, quickly at an early age, and what that means, what it takes, that there is a lot of aspects to a business. There's a lot of dimensions, the financial aspect, the sales aspect, the operations, which is fantastic. But I was really fortunate at a pivotal point where, I realized I wasn't going to learn enough doing it on my own, right? Really learning the hard way, if you will, of, trying this and making a mistake. And I made the wise decision to exit, some of those businesses and join a leadership development program. And it happened to be with Consolidated Graphics, which you kind of saw in the bio there.
Yep.
Now, obviously, R.R. Donnelly. And it was a formal 3-year leadership development program. And it really was the beginning of learning that there is a lot more to a business than just what you can do. And I think that's the first, key aspect of the journey of leadership is learning that it isn't about managing yourself. And honestly, to a large degree, it isn't even all that much about managing others. And I think in those early 3 years, I learned a lot about how to better manage myself.
Yep.
And I kind of call it the rubber band effect, and also manage others. And when I say the rubber band effect, I think everybody has, a certain, set of skills and capabilities, but they don't know, that it can be stretched. Okay. You can't go to the breaking point, right? If you break the rubber band, it's over. It's never coming back together. But if you stretch it consistently and over time, that rubber band will become, able to hold more or wrap itself around larger objects. And I kind of look at people in that fashion in some ways, or to some degree, including myself, as to what stretches me, what can make me a little bit stronger, push my boundaries out a little bit. And then I started to look at others that way. How can I push them? And I think there's some neat, opportunities inside of that that are super important, in those early phases. But as you mentioned earlier, it was really management. And I think I was treating leadership or thinking of leadership as just being in charge of people, in charge of a business unit, accountable for that, let's say, revenue, top line, bottom line.
It's a whole lot more. It's a whole lot more than that. Yeah.
Yeah, it really isn't. That isn't leadership at the end of the day, and I didn't know it. Right, I was learning some skills, and I would like to, think that I was a leader at the time, but I was a manager. I was really helping, more tactical things. I think a really great analogy, and I think a lot of people have used, is kind of the ship analogy. But I like to paint the picture for people that imagine a wooden oar managed boat that is too big to be managed by one person. That's the beginning of thinking about leadership. And you have to point a direction. You have to say where we're going to go and why we're going to go there. And then you got to get all those oars working together
in harmony.
That's just the beginning of leadership. And I think that was, the early, stage of my career. And where, this is amazing. It was very young for me. I got married at a very early age, and it was fortunate to have some leadership opportunities very early. So I got married at the age of 25.
Yep.
And literally 9 months later, my wife and I are, pregnant and having our first child, or about to have our first child. And it's really interesting because we're very excited about having this child, and it's our first child. We're young, we're healthy. Doctors are like, everything's great and good. And we're traveling to a wedding. So we lived in Colorado at the time, which I'm glad to be back here. And we're traveling back to Texas, right? Family's in Texas, and we're going to a wedding down there. And while we're down there visiting, my wife just says, something doesn't seem right. I don't, the baby's not kicking like it normally does. And we're about, let's say, 6 months. We've got, 3 or so more months before the expected due date. And so we go to a local, community hospital.
Yeah.
And in that moment, we find out that we're birthing this child today. There is an emergency C-section, and that this child is going to have to come out today, right? There's just, some complications with the pregnancy, and the child's not growing, developing as it needs to go. And it was very distinct that in that moment, looking backwards, I would learn about leadership. I would learn more about leadership in the next, let's say, 3 years of my life than I ever had the prior 5 years, or let's say even a decade.
Yeah. I mean, just in the heat of battle. Yeah.
It was amazing. Yeah. Wow. It was an amazing time. And it was, there's the distinct moment was in the second that he was born. So most children, well, at the time, this is now 2021. And the medical, there's a lot of medical kind of structure and formats for doctors. And I remember distinctly this conversation because the viable weight for a child, medical document, was 500 grams. So any doctor that saw a child or birthed a child less than 500 grams was not supposed to sustain or support the life of that child. It was not the complications, the medical viability, the financial viability. There's a lot of variables, right?
What year was this?
What
year was this again?
2021.
2021. Okay.
Yeah, June of 2021,
okay.
And bear in mind, I got married August of 2020, so this isn't even a year of being married, and so I remember the doctor coming back to me. My wife, obviously, because of the C-section, is not in a position to be, addressing major life decisions, and I can see in the doctor's eyes that this is not a good conversation, and this is a medical professional that you expect to be coaching you up and telling you, but I could tell immediately in the moment I would be coaching him up. It was an amazing moment because I could just see in his eyes that it wasn't what he expected and it wasn't something that he was prepared to deal with. And so he comes back and he lets me know that, hey, listen, this is not a healthy child. It's 490 grams. And I have to tell you that we're not really supposed to, at 490 grams, the threshold's 500, proceed forward. There's a lot of complications. This is just the beginning of a very long road if we can even sustain life.
Right.
And I just looked at him and I said, I hear you, but I know that you and this great team can help my son. And I know that we and my wife are prepared to handle whatever comes at us. And that was my first real leadership moment when I look back on it, because I'm now guiding someone else and coaching them up into having the confidence to move forward and know that even if they fail, I'm okay with their failure. Like the two most important things a leader does is coach someone up to do the impossible, and then let them know that even if they come short of it, that we're okay. We're going to be okay, but I want you to do everything you can. And I'm not kidding you, Brent. Every minute of the next 3 years was that exact conversation 100 times over, right? We spent 364 days in the intensive care unit, right? So in three different hospitals in two different states.
Yeah. Now you've said 2021 twice. Do you mean 2001?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, 2001. Okay. My goodness.
I sat there and I thought you said the first time. Then you said the second time. I'm going.
I'm so out of.
That's okay. That's okay. And I'm going. Now I know we talked about this before. He's not 3.
No.
2001. Yes.
Yeah, just turned 22 years old.
Yes. So, sorry. I was sitting there, and that's why I asked the clarifying, because I thought I heard it wrong. Okay. Gotcha. So the next 3 years.
I did such a good job getting out of the 2000s. I can't go back.
Yeah. So 364 days in hospitals.
In the intensive care unit.
I mean.
Yeah. So 3 different hospitals in Texas for the first 3 months, and then another roughly 9 months. It was just 1 day short of a year in the Denver. So we finally were able to get him on a jet to an intensive care unit in Denver. But yeah, I mean, he was extremely fragile. And my wife and I reflect back on this. There's a lot of blessings and there's a lot of faith that comes into, moving down a path like this. But there is an amazing amount of leadership that you don't know you have in you until there is literally a life on the line.
A life in your hands,
it was amazing. Yeah, it was amazing what was able to be done. Like literally, when people say a miracle has happened, it is not, just, let's say a faith. It is people, right? There were people that believed and people that did amazing things. And that was our sole purpose for the next, and honestly, still a lot to our life today was encouraging doctors to not look at the data, right? Every bit of the data every day said, this is a bad idea. This is not going to have a positive outcome. And we would show them that, okay, there is a 1%. And he is at a 1%, and you can do this, and the team can do it. And
the only way there is 1% is because somebody tried. That's the only reason there is the 1%.
And again, giving them the faith that they could do something they've never done, that the team could accomplish a miracle, and that, you know, it might not even come out perfect, but we'll be there with you. We're okay if you're imperfect, and they would actually outperform every time. And the same with the nurses. It's probably even more so with nurses. You know, they have difficult jobs in those intensive care units dealing with a lot of challenges. So to make sure that they've got the right energy and attitude to take care of our son, to not miss a step, to not miss a beat, to take care of him if we're not watching, you know, is again another level of encouragement and connection. And to me, that was the next, game changer in my leadership. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I mean, you took a lot on you and your wife both at a young age, and I don't like picking on, you know, today's young people necessarily, but what they think is hard has no comparison to what life has thrown at you and threw at you and your wife at that time, and your son. And I know that you know, that's a journey that'll continue on for the rest of your lives with him. But the tenacity and your resiliency and your upbringings and your faith gave you this situation to deal with, to help others, and gave you those doctors and nurses to help others. You know, it's just an amazing story. And this is not a comparative statement, I'm just giving a reference point. My oldest daughter was born just 3 weeks premature and needed to go to the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit, but just for a couple days. And there was a baby there who was 3 months old. It was his original birth date, and he was leaving the hospital after 3 months in the intensive care unit. And when he was born at like 1.2 pounds. Now you're talking 490 grams. That's small. I mean,
1 pound, 1 ounce. Yeah, 4 sticks of butter.
Yeah, that's just
an
insane
size
to think of this. And I mean, their skin is still transparent. It is just an amazing thing because it was neonatal care. I got to see some of those journeys, and it's a lot on young people. You guys were in your your early 20s, early to mid 20s, and that's just a lot to take on. That will teach you a lot quickly. And
we grew up really fast.
Yep, I bet you did.
And I learned really quickly I need to advance my career so that I can take care of my family, because we were commuting for the first 3 months. I was still living in Colorado, working my job. She was hunkered down at the intensive care unit in Children's, Texas. And I realized, this still a very low starter job at the time. I realized I need to go make an income. So I got into sales immediately. I started getting into other management areas immediately. And it's amazing what you are capable of when you have almost no other options. And nobody needs to be in that situation to push themselves. And I think that's another key takeaway, is that it doesn't have to be a life and death situation to recognize that you can do more, and more importantly, that others around you can also do more if you have the right, passion, vision, energy. It was really, like I said, transformative for my whole family. Still is to this day. But I mean, that switch in leadership, really changed a lot. I had a lot more understanding of what others are going through, and that it's relative, right? And you were just talking before that, not many people will ever go through an experience like we went through, but it doesn't mean they don't have a relative experience. Everybody has a hardship. It could be a father, a mother, a sister, a brother, a daughter.
Everybody's going through stuff, and you never know what they're facing. Yeah, and the key is, to tie it into the leadership component that you were, is a great leader, a parent, significant other, loved one, works on bringing the most out of people that don't believe they can do it even themselves, right? I mean, that's what true leadership, you talked about the rubber band effect on yourself and on others. A leader gets more out of people than they themselves believe they have. And it's by creating followership, and it's through inspiration, it's through example, it's through belief, it's through motivation, it's through tenacity, etc. My kids have thought I've been hard on them at times. It's because I know what the true potential is. And to hold themselves back. you didn't have any choice. You want to talk about motivation? You had motivation, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
as
There's very few times when you really have a life and death
you
situation,
had
and
it.
so
Yeah,
at the time it was, literally, I remember, the first full week, I went down to the chapel and just fell down
oh my goodness.
and just sobbed, and all I could think is why, my wife and I have been, healthy, we've done all these great things, and I just couldn't. There was no rationale to the why. And only now, more than 20 years later, every year it gets a little bit better. But I look back now and I go, this was the why, right?
That's
So that I
right.
could make a better impact in others' lives, that I could be a more humble leader, that I could realize that life isn't about the Porsche. It's about the people that probably made the Porsche. It's about
That's
the
right.
families that it feeds. It's about the
Wow.
other special needs kids that need someone to make sure they're taken care of. I realize that there is a much bigger we in the world than the me
Oh,
myself,
what a great
and
statement.
that I think that is, really what a really impactful leader can really embrace those attributes.
I
So I
appreciate you
think
bringing that
it's
up.
amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing it up. I talk on the podcast a lot about the village. I say it's about the we and not about the me. Social media has created a very, very uphill challenge for us as a society because it focuses to everything about the me a lot of the time. And the thing is that the things that you see aren't even real. I refer to it as fake book. It's not real. It's the best lighting. It's the best whatever. And then you create all this feelings of low self-worth because I'm not as good as this perfect body or this perfect car or this perfect boat or this perfect look or these perfect clothing online, and you're holding yourself, you're aspiring to be things that the people that you're aspiring to be aren't even there. It's just not that. And it's the simple things in life that make the most difference. It is about the we and the community and being empathic and having understandings of others and lending a hand, not because necessarily can, but because you want to. You got to lean into the other members of the village. So what an incredible
Yeah,
story.
absolutely. I mean, the gift of my son, while originally you think about the child themselves and what they're going to do, his gift is what he's had others, the transformation he's given to others around him,
Yep.
the desire to do good for those that can't help themselves, to speak up for those that can't speak up for themselves, to support those that truly, need a society to help with them. And it's funny because even as we talk about this, I hadn't connected the dot even myself, but that aspiration for that Porsche,
Mm-hmm.
I've never ever made that. I've never pulled the trigger because I always find a better use for those funds in people that are more deserving. Isn't that interesting?
Well, it is.
So
It's a
where I
valuable
started
lesson.
in a
Yeah.
path of what I can be and what it can mean for me, that even though I'd love the idea of one, and I still hope someday that the discretionary income can do it, I still can't see myself not putting it into something more useful for people that need that help. So it's
Couple
a
of
pretty neat. That was a
yeah.
pretty neat experience.
Yeah, a couple of comments on that. So I was raised by World War II parents. I was a late child, and they had a saying. My dad used to say it to me a lot. It's not what you have, it's what you give. And things don't matter. I always say on the show, the Joneses are your enemy. Keeping up with the Joneses is never a good policy maker. It's that's not going to lead to good things. Being philanthropic and it's not what you have, it's what you give. That's where that comes into fruition. And another one that was around a lot, and my wife and I practice this one a lot, is just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because I can go and buy something like that doesn't mean I should. There's other ways in which to do things. My family's very involved in the local hospice here in Des Moines. Actually, my family, we were blessed. I was blessed being raised by a set of brothers whose father started a business. They got back from World War II and turned it into quite a thing. And the business was sold back in the early 2000s. And with some of the proceeds, they established the Taylor House. And the Taylor House is the hospice for one of the major hospital networks here in Des Moines. And we have the Hops for Hospice coming up. We do a big fundraiser every year, and I participate in that and stay involved. And it just makes you feel so good. And I'm a very, 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 very small piece of that. There's thousands of people that are engaged in that every day. But back to those nurses and those doctors, and that isn't a survivable thing you're dealing with there. Your side of it was being so engaged and believing those people to get your son out of the dire situation and allow a life and a giving through still being here and your relationships. This is another way in which to give that gives peace to the family as someone important in their family or friends is exiting life as comfortably as possible. Its impact, these medical professionals are unbelievable.
Yeah, and really even the nurses in something that we learned that I still carry into my work every day is, that attitude that, yes, there's always challenges, but it's not going to do any good to the outcome to wear that frown on my face, to show that displeasure, to join in the anger, even though those could be very real emotions. We learned very quickly in the hospital setting that when we drug in there, when we wore the sad face, when we wore too much, and I'm not saying emotions are not a healthy thing to have, but
right.
that it affected those around us, that it brought the nurse down, it brought the doctor down, and their ability to perform was significantly impacted. So we always found a way to make sure we were prepared before we came in, right?
That's awesome.
We share those moments, but then we present what we need from them so that they can do their job.
Attitude,
and I think that goes into being a leadership.
Contagious, absolutely. You can control that. Emotional intelligence is far more important than IQ. EQ is a far more important, emotional intelligence is far more important than intellectual coefficient, overall intelligence.
Yeah, and that's a really good quote, saying, because they're way smarter people in that room than me, right? We're talking doctors.
These people are brilliant.
Really highly educated.
Right.
They're brilliant, right? I need them to connect, right? I need them to feel that they're worthy. And I want them to celebrate not the outcome of him leaving, because that was months, if not a year more away. I wanted them to celebrate just what they did that day,
That's right.
Because they did their job today, he made it another day.
He has tomorrow, right? He has a tomorrow.
Yeah, we had so many birthday celebrations, as much for, my wife as for the crew, right?
That's awesome.
It was a weekly thing, then a monthly thing, and the impact to them was amazing, right? Just that celebration of life, that incremental victory, and that's something to take back into your office, right? That's something to take back to your work, is that, it's not always about the finish line. It's about those little milestones that are getting you closer to whatever your, finish line is, whatever your stated goal is, because those are the victories that get you to the finish line. If you only celebrate at the end, you might not get there as fast as you could have.
That's right. Enjoy the journey, not the destination all the times, right? It's it's important in life.
Absolutely.
So
the other thing that I think, and it's a neat segue, it worked really well, was, that attitude that, in a good and bad way, and I'm going to say it both ways. I would literally have the approach, as I came back into the business for the next decade or more, with the nobody's going to die today, right? Yes, that's a terrible situation.
Yeah.
Yes, we might lose the customer. Yes, we might lose that sale. Yes, we might lose money. But you know what? We're still going to have a bed to sleep in tonight. We're still going to kiss our loved ones in the morning, and we're going to get get our paycheck tomorrow. But I also, while that was a great, one thing people would say about me is I'm a very calm, not highly, irrational, leader. Mm-hmm. But I learned, as a pivot to the next kind of leadership style, that, you do have to still understand others' situations. And I went from, saying, nobody's going to die today, to then this kind of, I think, interesting, component of our next generation, if you will, and society as a whole, of not minimizing someone else's feelings. You were talking about emotional intelligence before, really, as even we got into the pandemic, a whole new layer and dimension of leadership arose for me in this idea of, not minimizing a situation, not making it worse, but also not missing the opportunity to validate, right? And so, leading in a different way, also, was an interesting, pivot for me. And I'll take it back, to my family, because I learn a lot from them.
Sure.
My daughter, she's now 18, but, these are the teenage years over the last 5 years. And the one thing, we all say about teenagers is, they love you until they're a teenager and they don't like you until they leave home, right?
Right,
So
they come back. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and that was my daughter to a T. We began fighting about everything, but then I pulled up and I recognized that we're not really fighting. She's actually challenging me.
That's
she
right.
now has an opinion. She now has a voice, and it literally was a transformational moment for me that I realized that, what, if I just recognize that I'm hearing her, right? I don't challenge her and tell her that she's wrong, or I don't say, stop being drama, or some of those stupid things we can do as parents and say, that's not really a big deal. You don't know what a big deal is, right? The normal old school parenting.
Right.
And we actually just listen and we validate the emotion. We don't escalate it. And then they get to a place where they can hear and they can recognize, and through that,
they feel
relationship
heard too.
with my daughter,
right? They feel heard too.
Yeah, I learned a whole nother dimension of leading.
Yeah.
So it was, that you go back that emotional IQ. I think, really transformational leaders have added that, into their repertoire, if you will, to understand how to not minimize a situation, how to not escalate it, but help take that as a stepping stone. And I think that's a key attribute.
There's you and I have both been in leadership a long time. You are maybe a little bit younger, but there was an old acronym. It was LAER, LAER, and it was about, a problem resolution and dealing with people. And it stood for listen, acknowledge, then explore, then respond. And it was how you would get to what they were really feeling and what the underlying situation might be. It was used in the context of selling and kind of objection handling is what it was really developed as. But just interacting with your daughter, my kids, you try to give them voice and then explore why they feel that way, and then respond instead of just snapping back on things. And hey, the interesting thing about parenting is every day it's a new endeavor that you didn't think you're going to handle. You didn't know was coming at you, right? So with your first child, it's first day on the job every day, and because every day is a new day. And I didn't get them all right. I got a lot right, and I won't. We're all human too, but I think that's really important to realize. The emotional intelligence, like we've been talking about, is a key attribute to have. And that will always get people to be more, to get that followership you're looking for as a leader when they know that at least they're being heard.
Yeah,
it's one thing
absolutely.
to just, it's important. It's important.
I was reflecting back on this as we were kind of thinking about today's conversation. And, a lot of things I've learned are from my family. And I realized that while I learn a lot on the job, okay,
yep.
Family, if you take my son's situation, that was forced on me. I had no choice. I have to deal with that situation. I didn't ask for it. I didn't have an opt-out. I didn't have a career path change that could avoid it.
Right.
And my daughters are no different, right? I have to eventually listen to them. And when I went from, that moment of trying to make them do the things I wanted to, or only validate the things that I saw as important, and I started to listen to them better and validate it, they also started to give me feedback about myself that I couldn't hear previously, right? Mm-hmm. While I'm listening to them, I learned to listen to when I was validating them, I also began to listen to really what the core of what they're saying was, which was, Dad, you would be a better father if you would listen to this. Dad, you could be a better leader if you would think about things this way. Dad, you could do things differently. And because we're so different, right, generationally, educationally, and even just DNA, the nice roulette wheel they play for us as parents, we're apples and oranges, the two of us.
Right.
And when I realized that she was actually trying to help me and I understood it better, I became a better father and I actually became a better leader. And when you translate that into your business as a leader, what you're really saying is being open to challenging thoughts, being open to challenging ideas, making sure that the door is that you're really capable of listening will grow your business faster than anything, because now you're accepting, people that might challenge the direction you think you should go, challenge the project, and is it really as successful as you thought it was, and maybe introduce whole new ideas that can greatly accelerate the success of the business and the team. And I think that is kind of that capstone, if you will, on transformational leadership, that if you can build a diverse team and you can really foster those challenging thoughts and ideas, even if it's against you in some way, shape, or form.
That's right.
You can actually take your business to a whole new level.
You had in some of the notes we exchanged here how you kind of, when you were young, understanding it's leadership, not management, that had the ship moving of your life, your proverbial ship at 60 to 70%. And then you got into the people skills of it and understanding how to drive passion and vision. That was your interaction with the doctors, and you got the ship to 80 or 90%. And then that transformational leadership that you were just touching on, when the ship is really humming, getting the most out of it, comes from understanding the teams. And you had written down accidental to intentional with teams, culture, and the power of diverse opinions, methods, etc. It's a really big accelerant to your success. We did an episode here, it's been several months ago, but about leading genuine collaborative meetings and getting the most out of collaboration. And you have to go in and you have to break down barriers of a couple types. And in that episode, I talked about, first of all, you have to make it a safe place for people to understand they can engage and they can collaborate. So you do simple things like, as a leader, don't sit at the head of the table. Sit in the middle of the table. Don't take a seat of power from an old school position that people may be uncomfortable. They look at who's sitting at the head of the table. Sit somewhere else. Start by being opened up and being vulnerable, saying, I need your help. Simple things like that start to break down the barriers of people being uncomfortable to lean into the room. And then taking the heavy personalities, because you always come in and I'll just say it for myself, being a sales leader, sales personalities, when you come into a room where there's maybe support people and service people and administrative people, salespeople, and then leaders, the salespeople will try to take all the air out of the room, right? They're the strong personalities, want to be heard because that's what they've been doing their whole lives, is driving through that wall. You got to get them pulled back. You got to make sure that you manage that personality down so the other personalities can flourish and blossom their ideas, because the best idea in the room many times isn't heard because we don't make the room a collaborative space. And when you do these things to break it down, that's, to your point, the transformational leadership, getting all the people and those diverse ideas on the table. We as leaders don't always have the right answers. I make more mistakes. If I had all of them I lost, I'd versus the ones I've won in life, decision-making, great leadership aspects and attributes, deals, transactions, I'd have been retired long before. But I think you nail it there on, being intentional with your teams to break those barriers down and getting that culture of everyone gets to engage and your opinion matters. And you may not be your decision that we use this time, Sue or Bill, but man, we're better because we got to hear that idea and think through it and see if it was going to work or not work or whatever might be the case. So I think you nail it with your approach that, speeding the ship up. You talked about a boat with just oars in the water originally, and that's your first, you're kind of meandering aimlessly in the harbor, and you got to give some direction and so on, and then get the people to believe in you, to row harder and row together, and then finally at the end, utilizing all of the great attributes of everyone that you got on the team is key. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I love using the analogy, even with my own team and leaders that are coming through this process. Here we are, we're pitching ourselves on this big boat, and we start as a manager, meaning we we hire the right people that know how to, sit on the bench and pull an oar. Then we train them how to do it. And we manage them. We might move this guy here and this guy here because he's a little stronger at this point and this person's a little stronger. But that's really management, which is super foundational and fundamental. But then all of a sudden we realize, just because we have the people in the right seats now, we need to know where we're going. So now we move into that first leadership role where we're at the front of the boat. We're not pulling an oar, and we're saying we're going here. And then we start getting them moving that direction. And then we then elevate our leadership where we're empowering them to be the best, right? We're empowering their superpowers, that rubber band stretch that they've had, so that they now, without being told what to do, know who should sit where, know who's better, know when John needs a break and Joe needs to sit here and Sally needs to do this. And now this thing is moving, right? Moving, let's say 40, 50% power towards the destination. Then all of a sudden you connect the emotional aspects, right? You connect the, why are we going here? What is this going to mean? Did you know if we get there 2 days earlier, we can save A, B, C, X, Y, Z. We can do this, that, and the other. And all of a sudden you're now at 60% because you've got them using their strengths, working together as a team, pointed in the right direction, but they also have an emotional reason to go full power.
That's right.
And so
they're
now
in it. They're buying
now
in.
Right. Yeah, now you're at that 70 or 80%, and a lot of people think that's the 100%, right? You've got everybody going, their emotions are invested, we know where we're going, why we're getting there, but I say it's just short because of that last piece, that diversity of ideas and thoughts, that challenging, making sure you have people on your team that are different, that are unique, that bring different values and views, because maybe your boat was loaded with all Swedish people that's how they built the boat and that's how they knew how to operate it. And you throw in that one, let's say Finnish or English or whoever person,
right.
And they go, and they're the one guy when you finally let them speak that says, why are we using oars?
Yeah, you ever heard of a sail? Right. I think of the old, the old analogy where the king's putting his armor on. So it was a cartoon, and putting his armor on, and his pages are helping him put his armor on and everything, and it shows there's a sales guy at the door, and one of the pages comes up and says, "Sir, there's a salesman at the door would like to speak with you." And the next image in the cartoon is he says, "Doesn't that salesman understand I have a war to win?" And then it flashes back. I have no time for him. It flashes back to the sales guy, and he's holding a machine gun. And it's like, all you had to do is stop and listen for a minute, and you had this thing licked, and the rest is history. It is another story. So I'm a historian, and by education, and I was a military history leader. And you talk about motivation, and there were your son's situation for you and your wife was thrown at you. No choices, and you became very motivated. Another one, how the Vikings used to conquer lands, is they would show up to the lands that they needed to conquer, and the commanders and the leaders would burn their boats, their own boats. And the reason they would burn their own boats is because the only way home guys is to go get their boats. And that's a motivating factor. The only choice is to win and to drive and to create the opportunity to get back home. It's an extreme example of very, an antiquated time for sure. But the analogy still works. You know what I mean? How?
Yeah, and we talked before. We had our conference last week.
Yeah,
and we had a great keynote speaker, and even a simpler analogy. He said, "I want everybody in the room to point straight at me, and then take your arm and spin and reach as far as you can and point and pick a point in the back of the room. However far you can twist. Don't hurt yourself. Just do your best, right?" And he says, "Do your best, right?" Mm-hmm. And then everybody does it. And as you can imagine, everybody just does it, as an exercise to check the box, right?
Right.
Then he says, "Okay, I want everybody to take a deep breath, close your eyes, and now imagine that you can go 20% more, that somehow your muscles are so relaxed and you're so, disciplined that you can go even farther than you did the first time. And now he's like, point back at me and do it again. And what do you think happened with the whole room, right?
Everybody
they all were
further.
able to do more.
Yep.
Because there's that difference of, just doing it as the exercise versus really focusing on doing more. And I think everybody has that 20% more, and every leader can get 20% more, if you show them that way, if you show them that you can.
Yep.
And so I think that those are great analogies and fantastic. I wanted to just kind of touch on that last piece you wove in, because it's a big word, and I don't think it's a buzzword, but culture, right? The culture component. And while you didn't hear me say it the whole time, it's because culture is really the output. Culture is the end result of a leader and everything that went into it, from how you hired them, how you manage them, how you lead them, how you exit the ones that don't fit and keep the ones that do. Culture is just the byproduct. And I know a lot of people say you have to build the good culture and lead a good culture, and that's absolutely true, but it is really the byproduct of those fundamentals. If you are bringing in the right people for the right reasons, and you're pointing them the right direction in the right seat on the bus, and you're emphasizing their strengths and not their weaknesses, you will be building a culture as a byproduct.
That's right. It spits out the other end automatically.
The more they align.
Yep.
Exactly. Culture is a byproduct. It's an output, not an input. And so it's really important that, yes, you should have that quote, that message, this is our culture. But to make it come to life, it is not reiterating it in every management meeting. It is not getting in front of the headquarters team and the leadership team and the y'all team meeting and saying it. It is actually the byproduct of what the people are encouraged to do, why they do it, are they doing it together?
You live your culture, you don't create your culture. And it's a challenging thing. I did have one question before we kind of finish up, because you're president and COO of a large organization, a bunch of different franchises, Alphagraphics and Postnet and et cetera. And we touched on it a little bit, but how did COVID and the impact of the pandemic, because you had a lot of small business owners there, and they're living on the edge. They're not solopreneurs, but they're small businesses, right? $500,000, $1 million, $2 million type operations. And the changes in COVID overall were good for commercial print to a certain extent, because a lot of offices closed down, people needed to do things differently. And I guess what my question is I'll make a statement. And I've said this to my leaders. I've been in leadership for 28 years, and I've led through a number of things. I've led through economic downturns. I've led through a tsunami caused by a terrible earthquake that caused then the collapse of a nuclear disaster in Japan where our products are produced. I've survived through fires at chip factories that go into our products. But I never thought I was going to have to lead through a global pandemic. It was like the Old Testament was coming to fruition, right? I mean, it's like burning frogs next. It's like, what else is going to happen that we got to lead through? How did you, or what did you do, or what did you find important to lead through these last several years, being the head of a large organization like this that also supports all these other small businesses? That's what your business is, right? Is supporting these franchisees. What do you, if you look back at that, what were the biggest impacts?
Yeah, wow, that's a big and very fantastic question. There was nothing like the pandemic, and we talked about some amazing personal challenges with the birth and challenges with my son. But truly, that was a one dimension of my life. I mean, it impacted everything, but I still had a secure job. I still had a way to make a living. I still had a way to take care of things. The pandemic was a whole different animal. Everything. The
whole world got turned upside down. Everything, right? Everything.
You're literally wondering, am I going to survive this, right? Is my family going to survive this?
Right.
Is my job going to sustain this? There wasn't, I think when you say it that way, it really puts an emphasis on, how unbelievably challenging this was, because there was no stability in anything. There was no confidence of anything, right?
Right.
Do I have a job tomorrow? Can I get toilet paper? Can I get food? Is anything? Nothing was. Everything became fluid.
Are my parents going to survive it? Are my children going to survive it? Are my loved ones of other types going to survive it? What's going to happen? Right. Just a lot of fear.
And I would say it was by far my most challenging opportunity to lead, and in a lot of ways, really a privilege to lead, all of these, as you just noted, entrepreneurs, right?
Yep.
500 plus U.S. entrepreneurs that varying impacts, right? Some couldn't even operate, some completely, devastated, literally loss of life in some situations. So to lead them through that while going through all the personal challenges at the same time, knowing they're going through personal challenges at the same time, was literally going back to the fundamentals. Yep. And whether it was done perfectly or not, I know we did the best we could in the situation by basically just saying, I basically said, how do I communicate every way as much as I can that I'm here for you? I don't know the answers, but we're in this together. I don't know what's happening next, approach. But we will figure it out together.
Yep.
I don't know what tomorrow holds, but whatever comes, we will do it together.
We'll
and so I did every Friday I did a video that I recorded. I became phenomenal at recording and editing clips.
Yep.
And I would just highlight. I would take snippets of people that were finding new ways to solve challenges, whether it was face shields or the countertoppers or where they got the material, or that they just survived the day. They figured out how to classify it as an essential business. And every Friday,
did something different. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just share the small victories that a few people might have had. I would recognize that the challenge is not over, but I would also acknowledge that this week was better than last week.
We're closer to whatever the end is. That's right.
Yeah. I have no idea how long this tunnel is and how long the headlights need to be turned on. And I know right now we can't even see a week out, but at least we know that today is better than yesterday. And we did that every week through the entire pandemic. And I think that's an example of leadership that in a lot of cases, you don't have an answer and you don't know what it is, but people don't need that. What they need is that you're in it with them.
Yep.
And that you will be responsive to whatever comes our way, and that you'll find a way to help them through it. And most of that you didn't even need to deliver on. It was just the idea of it gave them the next day to, or gave them the energy and attitude to
just get
survive
through
another
it.
day.
Yeah. It's a great approach. And I'm a big analogy or old saying guy about, time. Yesterday's the past. Tomorrow's the future. And today is a gift. That's why they call it the present. And it is little things that you were doing to just keep people's focus on the togetherness. That goes back to you were creating culture again. Now it's microcultures. Culture has changed a lot. There's been some great articles in Harvard Business Review I've covered on some of the podcasts about. It used to be all about the macro culture. I work for a very large organization. We're 14,000 people in the U.S. That's the macro culture, right? The big goals the CEO puts out there. Microcultures became more and more important. Your team, your family, your neighbors. Those cultures became closer and more prevalent, and they should be and should stay that way. Culture didn't go away. It changed on where the importance lies, who the importance lies with. And I just wanted to ask you that question because leading a big franchise location like you are, and all those independents, I knew it wasn't easy. But sounds like you did a great job.
It was. I would say it was amazingly rewarding. In two ways. If we reflect on what it was like, trying the situation with my son and doctors, where we didn't know, if the next minute, hour, day is going to be positive, but we knew that that's not going to help anything.
Yep.
What can we do now? What can we try, even if it doesn't work? That gives us both hope and might actually work. And that was the pandemic.
What
We're both looking at each
what a
other
novel
scared to
idea.
death.
Yeah, it might work. Oh,
Yeah, let's just do something. Let's just put our energy into something positive, because thinking about what was is not going to get us anywhere. And
That's
what
right.
could be is where we want to be. And I think also, a really important attribute is finding the good from it. I've found so much good from my son's, birth and challenges in life. In the pandemic, there's so much good that came from that. How we
Absolutely.
united as a team,
That's
how we
right.
found ways to work together, how our employees, even at our owner level, we talked about this last week at our conference, how employees surprised us in their resilience and their commitment to not getting a paycheck today,
Yep.
to still coming in and knocking it out, because that's what we do at the end of the day. When we really have a belief in what we're doing and how we can help each other. And I really, while it was a really difficult time mentally and physically getting through the pandemic, I really think it made us a stronger company because of what we went through.
That's awesome. Well, hey, Ryan, I just greatly appreciate you coming on and sharing your approaches and your experiences. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure you touched on today? I want to let you kind of finish with any last comments that you have, but I think your approach to life, your different steps, understanding how to be, it's leadership, not management, how to involve the people, and then how to approach the transformational approach to get that ship up to 100% is outstanding. But is there anything else that you wanted to make sure you shared today?
No, it's been fantastic. I mean, as you just reiterated, good leaders are really good with people. And if we remember, no matter what business we're in, there's people inside of that business, and that they have a lot of dimensions to them. The more of those dimensions you can connect with and resonate with, the farther, faster you're going to take your career, your business, your life as a individual, father, parent,
Yep.
coach, manager, whatever that might be. And I hope that resonates with your listeners. And I just feel really blessed and honored to be on your show. And thanks for having me.
Oh, Ryan, it was great. Thanks for coming on today, too. Hey, to all the listeners out there, another great edition of the Leadership Lounge with Ryan Farris from Alphagraphics. Remember this, you're all awesome. Keep that shit up. Talk next week.